All right, so the way that this is all broken down, you can see about 14% or so just some basic SOLIDWORKS functionality, then broken down 20 to sketches roughly, 20 to assemblies, about 12% drawings. Maybe I've got those backwards, sorry about that, and 34% to part modeling. But really when you get down to it, I would almost bundle sketching and part modeling as one, and that puts us, right around 50%, almost 50% of everything that we're going to talk about is pretty heavily part modeling, which, all of us are SOLIDWORKS users. We know that the part model really is key to everything. But getting started here, let's just talk about some of these general, maybe things you're not aware that you can do inside of SOLIDWORKS, such as searching for options. Now, this is something that I personally find myself failing to do. I've used SOLIDWORKS for almost 20 years now, and I still use the unfortunate hunting and pecking methodology to find an option. But if you need to find options in SOLIDWORKS or a specific option, there is a much better way. So again, this works for both the system options and the document properties, and in the upper right corner, there is a options search. Just start typing something that you think the option means or needs, and we can see the nice highlighting will show you what's what. You click on the option, it takes you to the appropriate option and setting within either system options and document properties. Much, much easier than the technique I tend to do. Again, don't hunt and peck, use the system options. It's been in there for quite a while. A very, very useful way to navigate the possibly thousands of different options that we have inside of SOLIDWORKS. So another great piece of functionality that sometimes gets overlooked, and that is these meta options in the File Explorer. So what does that really mean? Well, as I'm sure we are all aware of, from the File pull-down menu, we can do things like pack and go, bundle the references of our assembly, get all the parts, maybe save them to a zip file or consolidate everything into a folder. But you can actually get to those by right-clicking on a SOLIDWORKS file inside of the file browser, or what used to be known as Windows Explorer. So you can open, you can pack and go, you could update references, you can rename, all without loading everything in full SOLIDWORKS. So it's a very, very useful piece of functionality. Again, right-click on a SOLIDWORKS file, you'll see that in there. Now, I will also mention that if you right-click on a SOLIDWORKS file and you do not see that SOLIDWORKS line item in there, head over to the CATI blog. We've got a couple of articles that walk you through how to fix that, or maybe better yet, just call us on support and we'll help you out with that as well. Here's one that really gets overlooked. Again, I'm an older SOLIDWORKS user. I find myself not using the most efficient way every day. And I fall into this trap as well. A quick way to close a file, don't save it, but reopen it. And that is the reload command under the File pull-down menu. So where might this be useful? Well, maybe you're working on an assembly like we have here, and maybe you added a mate and you blew up your mate tree. You blew up all your mates. Well, what we really need to do is basically just wipe the slate clean and start over. Now, you will lose work if you do this. Potential loss of changes is shown in red, but essentially SOLIDWORKS is simply opening that file back up from the disk, from the network drive, wherever, and overwriting everything in memory. So file reload, it's the same as close without saving and reopening. Much, much quicker. It's definitely a more elegant solution, that's for sure. But again, just watch because you will lose what you're working on there. So creating a template with features in it. I hope every single person, there's 117 participants, including myself, everyone knows how to create templates inside of SOLIDWORKS, the start parts or start assemblies or start drawings. But you can actually generate templates that contain solid model features in them. Maybe you need to create templates for a purchased stock or something along those lines. So templates, again, they super easy to make. They can control everything, or I should say save everything in the document properties. So every single option in the document properties can be saved and is unique per a template. But you can also save everything that we've got going on from the File pull-down menu. So if we go File, Save As, we'll go ahead and save it as a part template, and all the features in the tree will be saved into that template. Maybe that's not what you want, maybe it is what you want. Again, this is just an option. So now when we start our new customized template, we can see all the features are showing up there in the preview. Now, in my experience helping customers out on tech support, this is usually an accidental process. Maybe you find out about this by accidentally saving features in your tree when you save a template. But again, if you need to set up some various stock sizes, really easy way to do that. What about rotating about an axis? This is one of my favorite little hotkeys or tricks, if you want to call it that, inside of SOLIDWORKS. So main navigation of our models, adjusting the camera if you want to call it that, it's all done with the mouse. So the middle mouse button to rotate, the wheel to move it around, but you can also select a cylindrical face, and that's double clicking the middle mouse button. It's kind of awkward to get used to, but then you can use that cylindrical object, its axis, as your rotation axis. You can choose model edges. Again, double click that middle mouse button on the edge, or actually a model vertex, and that will redefine the center of rotation. So there's nothing you need to change in the options. Just essentially double click that middle mouse button, and that reestablishes that rotation axis. Nice little trick there. The reference triad. There's a lot that you can actually do with the reference triad other than what I do, just look at it. That's the little coordinate system in the lower left-hand corner of the UI. Maybe you don't ever think about it. I know I fall into that trap, but if you click the axes, SOLIDWORKS will go normal too. In this case, the Y direction, the Z direction, the X direction. Don't forget though that you can also use the arrow keys on the keyboard. That's Shift and the arrows to do those 90-degree rotations, and this is the Alt key on the keyboard, the left and right key arrows to go ahead and rotate that, keeping that normal vector constant. So a couple of things that you can do there using the coordinate system in the lower left-hand corner, Shift the arrow keys, 90-degree rotations, Alt the left and right arrow keys, rotating, maintaining that kind of vector out of the screen. And then the good old Control-Tab to switch models. If you're like me, you tend to have many different SOLIDWORKS files open. Well, do you want to go to the Windows pull-down menu and try to figure out what's what? Maybe you don't remember what the names are. Control-Tab to the rescue. Or hold it down, and you can see this nice little document switcher with icons on there. So Control-Tab again changes documents within SOLIDWORKS, or hold it down, and you can go ahead and see that little window switcher and then click on them with the left mouse button. So there you can see just a few, maybe little hidden gems for general SOLIDWORKS usage. Let's switch gears and talk about some sketches. So this is one that I personally get asked just about every single Essentials class that I have ever instructed, and that is, why does SOLIDWORKS go normal to the very first sketch I create and then never do it again? So sketches 2, 3, 4, to the nth, never goes normal to. You always have to hit that normal to icon after the fact. So here you can see kind of the default behavior of SOLIDWORKS. Select a face, insert a sketch, select that face, and then go normal to. Well, you can actually automate that entire process. There's an option inside of these system options. So under sketch, it's the very first tick box, auto rotate view normal on sketch creation and sketch edit. That's the cool thing about this. So now every single sketch we build automatically goes normal to, exit sketch. SOLIDWORKS gives us the previous view orientation. Same is true with editing any existing sketch. So again, take a look at those options. Maybe just remember auto normal to. You could search for it. It's one of the first tips we looked at here. And maybe you want to set your SOLIDWORKS session to automatically go normal to any sketch you create or edit. Another very, very useful ability is capturing what we like to call virtual sharps in SOLIDWORKS, and it's all about using the control key. And maybe one of the uses of the good old sketch point command. So this is a little bit, kind of tricky to see sometimes. So I'll preface it by saying we're going to hold down the control key by selecting the horizontal and angled line, and then click the sketch point command to find that virtual intersection point that was essentially removed by the tangent arc in there. So here's that hold down the control key action, the two lines up to the sketch toolbar and the point. Super, super quick. So it's a reference point at the intersection. You could then use that to dimension to really do whatever it is that you need. So that's kind of the hidden tool to generate that virtual sharp inside of our SOLIDWORKS sketches. We'll see this visited in just a couple of slides in drawings. It works there as well, but we'll use a slightly different mechanism to get there over on the drawings side of things. So using the Shift key to control the dimensions when we dimension two arcs. So Shift, select to control where those leaders go. Again, a little bit wordy to explain, much better if we just take a look at it. Typical SOLIDWORKS sketch, we have a slot sketch that we've created. And if we go ahead and then add a dimension, as I'm sure we're all aware, as soon as we add a dimension to the arc, the software always snaps to the center point of the arc. Now we can change it over in the Leaders tab of the Property Manager, adjust what we call the arc condition, but there's a way to get that dimension to the tangency while we're creating the dimension itself, and that is hold down the Shift right now. Shift key is pushed down, and then the software automatically jumps out to that tangency condition. So when you're holding down the Shift key, it's really based on a mouse position or a gesture. So if your mouse is closer to the center point, that's where the leader is going to go. If it's closer to the tangency, that is where the leader is going to go. And using the biad, what Will refers to as the biad, or just a 2D triad or a 2D coordinate system in a sketch to create that angle dimension. So typically, one needs maybe 2 lines to generate an angular dimension or 3 points to generate an angular dimension. This little enhancement was put in the software a couple of releases ago where that secondary entity is no longer needed. So here we have that same sketch, and we will simply add a dimension to the angled line and the end point. There's that second click, and there's that little coordinate system that pops up. And then we can go ahead and specify that dimension. So let's look at that one again, because it's really easy to miss what's going on. So dimension to the line, to the point, click the axis, place the dimension. So it just eliminates, in this case, the need of creating a horizontal construction line there. So there you can see just a quick way to create that angle dimension with only one sketch entity there. So what about a couple of little maybe tips or hidden commands about part modeling? Actually, I hope this isn't hidden at all, and I hope every single SOLIDWORKS user today knows about this, and that is the force rebuild, the Control Q regeneration of a SOLIDWORKS part model. Control B, or the little rebuild button, it really only modifies or regenerates the modified geometry. So let's go ahead and take a look at what this is all about here. So here we've got the main, or the very first base feature has a rebuild symbol on it. So of course we go up, we try to rebuild, and it really doesn't do a whole lot for us, unfortunately. But if you hold down Control and hit Q, the software sequentially rebuilds every single sketch, feature, reference entity, you name it, from top to bottom in the tree. So it's, it's really the best way to rebuild a part, in my opinion, but do understand if it is a very complex part, hundreds of features, it's going to take a while to rebuild. So, use it wisely. They always like to say, with great power comes great responsibility. Control Q rebuild, very, very useful. Again, it'll take care of any kind of issue that you potentially have rebuilding your tree. Now, there's several different ways to use rebuild. I added this little chart to this slide. You can get to this chart simply by searching the SOLIDWORKS help for force rebuild or just rebuild. It'll take you here. This is just a screen grab from the SOLIDWORKS help. But I wanted to show and briefly just mention the different ways to rebuild. Of course, Control B is the basic rebuild. That's the little red light, green light. But Control and Shift and B will rebuild all your configurations. So that might be one that we're not fully aware of. Of course, Control Q that we just looked at for parts. Notice assemblies is skipped right here. Drawings and sketches, all works the same there. Control Shift Q, force regens all your configurations. That might take a while if you've got a complex part with many, many configurations. And then a separate Control Q only rebuilds the top level assembly. So that's an important thing to understand. It doesn't dig into sub-assemblies or sub-assembly mates or down to the feature level or anything like that. So just keep something like that in mind. Again, I got this, that screen just from the SOLIDWORKS help. Easy to get to if you want to print it out, or, Control or Control Shift, either B or Q will do simple rebuild or full rebuild. So the flat tree view, Control T. This is a very, very useful way, in my opinion, to visualize the feature manager tree on the left. Initially, you might think your tree is in sequential order, but it really isn't, because SOLIDWORKS will nest the sketches to order them with the features, and that really can get things a little bit out of order. But if you right-click on the feature, go to Tree Display, or hit Control T, SOLIDWORKS will unabsorb the sketches and show us the 100% true chronological order of our model. So this will lay the sketches out in the order we've created them, the features, so on and so forth. A couple things I'll mention about the flat tree. While it's very, very useful, folders in the feature manager tree don't play well with the flat tree, since folders, essentially will reorder the features to combine them into folders. So my recommendation, if you're going to use folders to group your feature manager, or your features, in the tree, you probably shouldn't be looking at introducing the flat tree, or if you like to model with a tree that's flattened like here, you can't use folders right there. So it's kind of one or the other. We've found in our testing, if you have a very complex model and you have many, many features, maybe hundreds of features, for example, in folders, you go flatten that out, you will notice a very significant lag when you try to select a feature, as behind the scenes, SOLIDWORKS is kind of unfoldering everything to make some words up there. You'll just notice a delay. So it's kind of a performance hit to have folders, large parts, and the flat tree. So kind of one or the other there. One of my favorites, this isn't really, it's an oldie but goodie. Anytime you're creating a feature and you need to go up the surface, just double click. So here you can see a good old example from SOLIDWORKS Essentials. Extruded boss of the rectangle, we want to match it up to the cylinder, double click on that face. It'll automatically select that up to surface in condition, merge everything for us. So super, super simple. Extrude command, double click, automatically goes up to face. So again, kind of an oldie but goodie, very, very useful. Another quite useful item is the ability to use the previous selection. So maybe you're working on a part such as we have on screen here. I know I've done this. I've selected a number of edges to maybe fill it, and I accidentally click in empty space, which of course clears the selection. Well, in the right-click menu, there you can see a previous selection. So SOLIDWORKS remembers that one step prior. So you can always get to it, and it's in that right-click menu. And I'll also like to add, there's always good stuff in the right-click menus in SOLIDWORKS. Those context-sensitive menus usually, not always, but usually will have that command you're looking for. And if it doesn't have the command, well, that's always where the command search or maybe the shortcut toolbar comes into play. But very, very useful to take a look at that right-click menu to get something that maybe isn't apparent. Another really useful right-click command or menu option is Select Other. And this allows us to select obscured faces or edges. So if we've got a complex model and we have a number of faces that are kind of behind other geometry, Select Other allows us to get there quite easily. So here we can see that same ratchet model. And what we're going to do here is right-click Select Other on that face, and that face becomes transparent. Now, as we successively right-click the mouse, any face we right-click over is also made fully transparent, and that allows us to select directly through the model and go ahead and get there through there. So again, right-click Select Other, successive right clicks of the mouse will make those faces transparent so you can select directly through them. Select Tangency. Again, we're going back to that right-click menu. I can't emphasize it enough how helpful it is to get through everything using that right-click menu, Select Tangency. I use this constantly when I'm running SOLIDWORKS. So instead of holding down the Control key and selecting these faces individually, right-click, Select Tangency. I will also reiterate, take a look for this when you're sketching. There's also a really nice right-click menu command when maybe you need to select edges called Select Loop, or in some cases, I use a lot in surface modeling, Select Open Loop, but all about the right-click over maybe a face or right-click over an edge to get some of these, I don't want to call them advanced selections, just additional selections for your SOLIDWORKS modeling needs. Normal to with two selections. Now, I can't really take credit for this because I didn't write the software, but I think Will may have taken this one from me because I like to talk about this one a lot as well. So you select a face in SOLIDWORKS, you hit normal to, you can kind of roll the dice as far as the orientation of that normal to model position is going to be. But you can actually control it with two selections. The first face you'll see selected, the software will reorient normal to. The second face, the vector normal to that face is pointing to the top of the user interface. So let's go ahead and take a look at it here. So normal to, vector. And then once we click it, the software rotates around. So we'll go normal to, and then the little peg is that upwards vector. We have complete control over what's going on there. So kind of a hidden thing, doesn't really mention it a lot. If you're like me, you just select the face and hit normal to, but now you can click one face, Control key the second face, and you have complete orientation control when using that normal to command. Mirroring a 3D sketch. This is an awesome piece of functionality. This, I believe, was introduced in 2018. I might be off on my releases there, but up until this point, it was simply something you could not do in SOLIDWORKS. We always had very clever workarounds with surfaces and converting entities and things like that. But let's be honest, a dedicated command functionality makes it so much easier. The other thing that I want to mention with mirroring a 3D sketch, this functionality allows us to use reference planes as our mirror entities. That kind of gets lost with this command because it's so cool to mirror a 3D sketch. But I think the real power is simply any sketch mirror we use, we can mirror about a reference plane. So we can select everything, and here we can see we'll pick that reference plane directly from the feature manager tree. We've got a nice, really stable reference for our mirror, and now we have, who knows what that's going to be, but most likely some type of swept geometry. So use a reference plane. You can mirror 2D sketches across reference planes, and as you saw here, a 3D sketch across a reference plane. And then insert mirror part command. I think this one kind of gets forgotten about in SOLIDWORKS quite frequently. If you are modeling the right-hand version of a part and you need a left-hand version of the part, insert mirror part to the rescue. So there's a dedicated operation. So the way that this works is select the reference plane in the tree to mirror around, and then insert, pull-down menu, mirror part. It's kind of like the other insert part commands where you get to choose the type of geometry you bring across, and it initially creates a linked kind of parent-child relationship, so an associative component back to the original. There is an option to break the link, and it will absorb the features and do a clever little mirror body at the end of the tree, so you have two independent models, the right hand and then the mirrored left-hand version of the part. Common question we get is the insert mirror part command is grayed out. It's because you need to select a planar face or a reference plane to mirror across before you go to that insert pull-down menu and click mirror part. Pressing the tab key to hide bodies. I will say, can't remember when they added this to SOLIDWORKS. It's been many, many releases ago, but this is one of my most used hotkeys aside from maybe the control key or maybe escape inside of SOLIDWORKS. So simply tab to hide, we call it. Put your mouse over something. Of course, you can click on it, use the little creepy eyeball to hide it, but just hover your mouse now, hit tab. Tab to hide, hover your mouse in the same place, shift tab to show it. So it works for any multi-bodied part. It works the exact same in the assembly space. So yes, I'm going to repeat myself again. Hover your mouse over any body, tab to hide, shift tab to show, or at the assembly space, hover it over a component, tab to hide, shift tab to show it. You can hold those combinations down as well, just a little side note. So if you hold down the tab and simply just start dragging your mouse around, it'll just kind of actively hide things. Kind of interesting, but it's all about tab to hide, shift tab to show. And then let's switch gears a little bit and talk about assembly commands. So grouping features in folders and the mates to view in assembly. So this is a little bit kind of hard to understand maybe. So let's just jump over and take a look at this. So typically when we visualize the assembly feature manager tree, I'll say it's more kind of part centric, where we have the part and then we have access to all the planes, origin features that the part needs. I don't know about everyone else on the webcast today, but when I build an assembly, I spend most of my time adding components, working with the mates, and a little bit of the time editing the features of the parts themselves. So there's actually a way to kind of flip the feature manager tree in the assemblies and put the mates at the forefront and kind of put the features behind the scenes a little bit. So with all of that explanation out of the way, it's all done with right-clicking, tree display, and it's called View Mates and Dependencies. And I kind of think of it as the reverse. So now under each component, we see the mates, and now there's a nice little folder that we can still get to go ahead and adjust and modify any of the features that we need. So a lot of these, at least a couple I should say, it's all about right-clicking at the very top level of the feature manager tree and just taking a look at some of the other ways that we can display all that model information on the left-hand side of the UI. Another one that maybe gets forgotten about, especially if you like to use the command buttons on the command manager, and that's to use the right mouse button to actually click and drag to rotate. So as a lot of things in SOLIDWORKS, it's very mouse-centric, especially when we get to the assembly. Left click and drag a part moves it, but if you right-click, hold down the right mouse button, you're actually rotating that component around. So you don't really ever need to use the dedicated Move Component button or the Rotate Component button. Just left-click to drag, and as we saw here, right-click, hold down that right mouse button to go ahead and rotate it around. And then another one, this is one that I fall into a trap too, not utilizing the Shift-C command to collapse the feature manager tree. Super simple, just another hotkey that we've got inside of SOLIDWORKS. So as we take a look at the feature manager tree on the left, everything has been exploded out, everything has been expanded. And this is the approach I usually take. I click the little arrows and manually collapse everything, which is extremely inefficient. The better way to do it, Shift-C. SOLIDWORKS will automatically collapse everything for you, a much, much easier way to go about in working with your assemblies. And then leveraging the assembly component preview window. So what does that really mean? What is the component preview window? This can be really useful when putting components together. Again, we spend a lot of our time adding mates, and in order to add the mates, we need to select the appropriate face or edge or vertex on the model. So we spend a lot of time just rotating, zooming in, and zooming out. But the component preview window kind of helps us with that. You can get to it by just clicking on any component, and it's going to pop it up in its own window on the left-hand side of the UI. So it's that little icon right there, component preview window. So now we're actually selecting on the part in the assembly, but the part is in its own window over on the right-hand side of things. So really useful if you, again, you need to mate to one of those internal cylindrical bores and it's completely obscured by outer model geometry, for example. And last but not least, talk about a couple of useful commands for drawings. So finding the intersect for a theoretical sharp. So I mentioned quite a while ago, I said that we'll kind of revisit that virtual sharp command again in drawings, and here we go right there. So here we have a situation where we possibly need to add some dimensions to vertices that don't exist anymore because we've filleted the part. So as I saw pop up in the text there, when in doubt, right click. So that's a right click find intersection. I'll go ahead and I'll replay this one. It's really, really easy to miss. So here we go again. Add your dimension, right click, find intersection. There it is right there. So it'll put in that virtual sharp and it actually attaches the dimension leader line to it automatically. And we can simply select that other vertex and place it. So yeah, I really like that. When in doubt, right click. Alt drag for drawing views. One of my, again, I know I've said several personal favorites. I mentioned that Will created this independently. I've got a lot of these same ideas that I like to talk to my students about when I teach Essentials or really any SOLIDWORKS class. And this is one right here, using the Alt key to reposition your drawing views. We've all made SOLIDWORKS drawings. We're probably all aware that in order to move one, you must left click and drag perfectly on the dashed border, which is sometimes not easy to do. Don't worry about that. Just hold down the Alt key. So if you hold down the Alt key, no matter where you select on the drawing view, you will simply move the drawing view. So much, much easier. I like to add that this also works for tables in your SOLIDWORKS drawings. So you don't need to select a table and choose the little microscopic cross symbol to move it. Just Alt, drag a table around, and it works the same way. So really subtle enhancement. I maybe shouldn't call it that, but that's how I think about it, that they've added to tables, drawing views, much, much easier way to navigate. And then the ability to simply create multiple leader lines, and that's using the control and dragging the handle at the end of an arrow. So this one's kind of tricky to see. Here we have a note reference hinge, and we want to add a secondary leader. So select the note or annotation, control, grab the little grip at the end, and just simply drag and drop. That will easily create you a second leader there, or a third leader, or whatever the case is. So select a note, hold down the control key, select the end little dot or point at the arrow, and drag it to its new destination. And did you know that you can auto-arrange all your dimensions after using the model item command? If you're like myself, I definitely leverage the model items command quite heavily in SOLIDWORKS, and my dimensions are always a mess because I don't do a very good job of positioning the dimensions in my sketches. So now using a filter here to select all dimensions, on the dimension palette there's an auto arrange dimension button. Click it and SOLIDWORKS will space those dimensions out pretty nicely. Now, do a couple of dimensions need to be repositioned? I think we'll all agree maybe a little bit of work needs to be done, but it is much, much better than where we began. Now, in that dimension palette, that's just when you select a dimension there, you can hit the palette. You can also adjust the scale, and you can control many of these settings within the document properties, and you can go ahead and get a little bit better positioning there. So with that said, I say thank you very much for your attendance. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, whatever it is, you know, fire me a dimension there, or excuse me, not a dimension, fire me an email, you know. I put it up there because I want to communicate with everyone. So anything you've got, send it in. Might take me a couple of days to get through all the emails if I get a lot of them, but I'll definitely do what I can to get you back an answer that best takes care of what you need. If you have any suggestions about Webcast, topics in the future, you know, go ahead and send that in as well. So again, I thank everyone for joining me today. I hope everyone has a great rest of their afternoon and into the weekend. I'll just mention that take a look at cati.com/events/schedule. We've got a number of webcasts coming up for February. So we've got our printing webcast talking about PolyJet support removal, and then our CATIpult kind of a little bit more in-depth technical session, just getting started on configurations. Not getting super deep into configurations, but just getting in there. So yes, I see a question come through this webcast. It will be uploaded to YouTube. So definitely take a peek at our YouTube channel. And if you have any questions, you want the presentation, you lose the link, whatever it is, I'll send my email address out in the chat as well here real quick. Don't hesitate to give me an ask. That is for sure. So everyone, again, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your Thursday.